thousands of Ukrainian children have been taken to Russia over the last year, some of them tricked by being told that they're going on a summer camp or football camp. Others have been forcibly taken from their parents. And so I met a number of mothers who are trying to get their children back, and a couple who actually made an astonishing journey right across the front lines into enemy territory in Russia to rescue their daughters. Just came back last month.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Christina Lamb has discovered a dark and disturbing practice that Ukrainian children are being abducted and sent to camps in Russia or Crimea in a systematic campaign. Well, Christina Lamb joins us now live from Kyiv. Morning, Christina.
Good morning.
So this is a really difficult read, a harrowing read. Just tell us about some of the women you met and their stories.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, to me, this is one of the most chilling aspects of this whole horrible war. Basically, thousands of Ukrainian children have been taken to Russia over the last year, some of them tricked by being told that they're going on a summer camp or football camp. Others have been forcibly taken from their parents. And so I met a number of mothers who are trying to get their children back, and a couple who actually made an astonishing journey right across the front lines into enemy territory in Russia to rescue their daughters. Just came back last month.
So these women, in some cases, as you say, they were tricked and they were told that this was almost like a bit of respite, a nice camp for the kids to escape the war?
Exactly. They were in occupied places such as Kherson or Kharkiv, and were told that it was a way for their children to escape the shelling, that they would go for a couple of weeks. And so the ones in Kherson, which is in southern Ukraine, were taken across to Crimea. It's not very far away, a few hundred kilometers, told that they were going for 2 weeks. And they weren't really given a choice. And they were also told, strangely, that the children needed to bring their birth certificates and all their documents. And then the children didn't come back. And first they were told that they were staying a few more days, then a few more weeks, then they were being moved to another camp. And so for some of these women, it's now 6 months and their children are still there. And of course, they're absolutely terrified that they will never see them again.
And how many children are we talking about? Many thousands?
Yeah, we don't know the exact number. So I spoke to the Children's Commissioner, and she said that they have documented 16,221. But they think it's many, many more than that. I mean, she said they think it's hundreds of thousands. And I mean, one of the odd things about this is the Russians are not secret about this. They're quite public. They've been actually parading some of these children on TV in Russia and describing them as abandoned children that they've rescued from the war. So they themselves have said that they've got more than 700,000 Ukrainian children. Now, the Ukrainians don't think it's as much as that, but, you know, it's a very big number.
And this is a systematic approach by the Russians to achieve what?
So it's partly seems to be indoctrination, because the children, when they're taken to the camps, everything is in Russian. It's Russian history. They're forced to sing the Russian national anthem. One of the boys I spoke to said that they were beaten if they didn't sing it. They were shown propaganda films. And it's also about, you know, taking the population from Ukraine. And in some of the cases, the parents were told that if you will give you money and an apartment if you come to Crimea to take your child, but you have to live here, you can't go back.
And are these families able to have any contact at all with the children when they have been taken away?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because the phone connection between Ukraine and Russia is not good. Some of them have been communicating on Telegram, but they are still in touch. I mean, that's the fear of I mean, I can only talk about the ones that I met, but
Mm.
that's their fear, that eventually they'll be moved, as they said, sort of deep into Russia, and they'll lose contact. And in fact, the boy who'd been missing for 6 months, they're being told, like, if he doesn't come back soon, he'll be adopted, because under Russian law, apparently, if a child is so many months without the parents, if it's 6 months without the parents, then they're taken over by the state. So it's a really insidious thing. I've covered lots of wars, and sometimes, children, many times children are victims, and sometimes there are kidnappings. We saw Islamic State kidnapping Yazidi children, and it happens. But this kind of sort of systematic, forcible abduction is really something that I haven't seen, not like this.
Tell us about the women who made that incredible journey, as you said, around front lines to be reunited with their children.
Yeah, they were incredibly brave, because if you think about it, Ukraine's at war with Russia. Russia is doing some terrible things here. So for these women who had never been outside of Ukraine, actually had barely been outside of where they lived in Kherson, to then go on this journey, and because they can't get from Ukraine directly to Crimea south, because it's going through Russian soldiers and territory they can't get through, they had to make this incredibly circuitous route. So they actually had to go all the way to Poland, and then north to Belarus, and then into Russia, and then back down south into Crimea. So a journey that should have been a return trip less than maybe 300 miles ended up being more than 5,000 miles. And of course, they were very scared going into Russia, because they didn't know what would happen, and whether they might be arrested, whether they would get their children back.
But they arrived at the camps where their children were.
Yeah, and they were quite surprised. I mean, so just to put this in context, as I told you, I mean, many thousands of children have been taken. Only 307 have been rescued. And we're not really, the Ukrainians are quite secretive about how some of this was done. But these particular mothers went with a group called Save Ukraine, which is set up by the former ombudsman of Ukraine, Mykola Kuleba. And he'd actually sort of negotiated with the Russians, so got permission that if they brought all their documents, that they would get them back. Now, why the Russians are agreeing to that, I don't know. Whether it's because it's just very small numbers, or whether it's, they don't want it to appear that they are actually forcibly taking the children and not letting them back. I don't know.
And what was it like for them to be reunited?
They were so happy. I saw a video that they had taken. One of their mothers, Tatiana, she told me that it felt like she'd had 3 sacks of rocks on her back, and that they all fell off in a second as she hugged her 11-year-old daughter, who she, was her only child. She really didn't think she'd see her again.
Gosh, and the trauma. I mean, for the 11-year-old daughter, how are the children coping who've been reunited?
Yeah, I mean, children are remarkably resilient. I also went to a school in Irpin this week, which was badly destroyed in Russian shelling, but has now been repaired and reopened. And literally, I just arrived. I was talking to the headmaster about the effect of all of this on children, and the endless air raid sirens, and a siren went off. So all of the children then appeared, and very no panic, all in their coats and little hats and their backpacks. These are kids aged 6 to 18, all then herded into the 2 shelters, an underground bunker, and sat there for, it was an hour and a half before there was an all clear. This is happening almost every day. So, of course, it's very disruptive for the children and for the teacher as well. Actually, one of the teachers said to me she felt, I mean, she was in tears actually, but she said to me she felt her job was to stop the children growing up hating because of this. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so desperately sad. I mean, I'm reading in your piece here that there's estimates that the average child in Ukraine has spent more than 900 hours underground over the past year. So it's not just the fear of the war, it's the fact that they're also just having their lives disrupted and just being underground for such long periods.
Yeah.
Listen, Christina, it's wonderful to speak to you as ever, and thank you for bringing such an important story to Times Radio and also to the Sunday Times.